Now, the right time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio.
And ESPNradio.com.
The NBA draft was last night. I'm sure you've heard most of the analysis there is, for the analyzing. So, but there's still a lot of stuff to talk about with this draft. Plus, it's Friday night, and I'm here, so this is what we're going to talk about. So, the draft is always great, and we like the draft in large part because you see dreams come true. You see people's mamas in the green room and the whole family and everybody crying and the dapping up with your dad and the coaches and everything else. Like, it's the moment where everything that you've worked hard for has come together, and you have a brief moment to bask. It's something that honestly isn't really success. All you did was get a down payment on the rest of your life. Like, the success would be what have to come later. But it's a milestone. It's an accomplishment. It's something that you should be able to celebrate at least for a day, at least for a night, at least for an afternoon, at least for an hour, at least for a minute. And then this happened when the Knicks made their pick.
With the fourth pick in the 2015 NBA Draft, the New York Knicks select Kristaps Porzingis from Liepaja, Latvia. He last played for Sevilla in Spain.
Damn, dog. They showed the video of some little kid crying and taking a picture of himself crying. And I gotta say, that little kid got the nerve to be booing anybody. I'm sure he's got good grades based upon those glasses, but I feel like he's been picked on enough to where he doesn't need to be out here picking on anybody else. His parents need to take him home and start talking to him about the golden rule. I'm sure he's going to grow up to be a fine young man, but, come on, bruh. This, by the way, is the reaction to a 19-year-old who is 7'1", 230 pounds with a 7'6" wingspan, who, from what I can tell, can play some on the perimeter. This is my question for Knicks fans. This is my question for Carmelo Anthony, who by all accounts was not very happy with what went down in this draft. Who did you want the Knicks to take? Seriously, who did you want the Knicks to take? Or more importantly, who did you think the Knicks were going to take? Because I have this question for the people who went to Brooklyn and then just basically booed. And look, I understand. For New Yorkers, part of the fun is booing people. We agree with that, right? Part of the fun in some places is booing people. Some people just enjoy that sort of thing, right? So, if you went to boo, then you're going to boo. Okay. However, I would think this. And you let me know if I'm crazy here. I would think that if you cared enough about the NBA draft to go to the NBA draft, all right, that you would have read something about the NBA draft. Because if you read something about the NBA draft, I feel pretty confident saying that you would have seen this one coming, right? Hey, man, it sounds like the Knicks even tried to do you guys a favor. They put it out there that the Knicks were thinking about either Porzingis or they were going to take Frank Kaminsky, and I think the plan on that was get you as mad as you could possibly be about the prospect of taking Frank Kaminsky, so then you'd settle on Porzingis. Well, that didn't work. So who else was it that the Knicks were thinking about? Did you want them to take Justice Winslow? Because I do agree. We talked about this with Fran Fraschilla last night, that with fans, it's all fun and games until you draft somebody that they haven't seen play. And it should be noted, there aren't many things that bring out our sporting xenophobia quite like the idea of you playing basketball overseas. Like, we act like they don't have rims on the goals when they play overseas, right? We act like they play on a 9-foot goal. And I admit, I don't say much about guys when they play overseas because I just don't know enough about what's going on, right? Like, I'm not about to give you some quote-unquote expert prediction when I have not seen them play, right? Like, I'm not going to do that, but I'm not necessarily saying that there's a problem with them. Man, we open up the phone lines to talk about European basketball players, and I hope your boss sitting on the line. You might mess around and get fired. Right. So part of that is just people are down on European basketball players. Okay, I understand that. I just need to know who else they were going to take. Did you want them to take Willie Cauley-Stein? Who you got? Now, Justice Winslow, I think Justice Winslow can be very good. I don't know if he will. See, the thing with Winslow is this. He can only go one way. Now, understand that this league is full of dudes that can only go one way. There are all kinds of players that can't do anything with their offhand. Clyde Drexler went straight to the Hall of Fame. Can't do a thing with his left hand. I don't even know if Clyde Drexler can, hold a fork steady to cut a piece of meat with his left hand. Latrell Sprewell was another guy. Could not go left. There are a lot of guys who cannot go to their offhand. Justice Winslow is left-handed. He has no proclivity, ability, or desire to use his right hand. Is he still going to be able to get to the rack? Because if he still gets to the rack, it doesn't matter. Is he going to be able to shoot that well? I don't know. He's also only 6'4.5". If it started slow for Justice Winslow, he was going to get the blues up there in New York. But this young man, Porzingis, all his dreams just came true. And y'all just booed him. Just booed him. You're stuck with him. I'll say this for fans in the NFL, and maybe this will be the way when the season starts in basketball, but in the NFL, people will lie to themselves repeatedly about the quality of a draft pick. And you know why? Because why not? What do you get out of disliking the guy that your team just got? What do you get? You get nothing. I personally feel as though you guys need to start looking out for Mr. Porzingis because he's in for a rude awakening when he comes to New York. Now, it's not a rude awakening about all the booing and everything else, right? He dealt with that. He dealt with that like a pro, too. He answered questions while it was going on. He seemed unaffected. He didn't look like he wanted to go home. Didn't look like he wanted to flip anybody the bird because I don't want to flip somebody the bird. But have you seen this about our friend Porzingis, where one of his teammates was asked about how well he would assimilate to American culture, and they say that Mr. Porzingis is ready for American culture. And you know why he's ready for American culture? Because he goes to World Star Hip Hop almost every day. Now, a lot of you are probably recoiling, but at the same time, that is America. It is a part of American culture. And it reminds me of my favorite thing about the NBA and the NBA draft, which is Europeans who learn about the United States through the unique prism that is being an NBA player. All right? So he's walking in the door with the World Star background. He's about to be up in the spot. Man, he's about to have the time of his life. I can't wait to hear interviews with him, though, by the end of the year. The first time he hits us with a you know what I'm saying, I'm going to feel like this, ladies and gentlemen, is the melting pot that is America. Right? And please don't hit us with a nah mean. He's going to be our new George Mirasan. You remember George Mirasan came over? I think he's from Romania. And George Mirasan played for the Bullets. He's in D.C. in the Chocolate City era. Man, it wasn't before the end of the season. George Mirasan was out there wearing cross colors and Jordans, talking slang. I love it. It is everything to me. But the only thing about it, Mr. Porzingis, I'm going to tell you this right now. You may have got a little hint of this when you came to town for the draft, but Brooklyn, you're not going to recognize it. When you go over there, I'm sure that you've been listening to Biggie records, and perhaps, who knows, you're more into conscious stuff like Mos Def, and you've heard about a certain impression of Brooklyn. Here to tell you, buddy, that Brooklyn's gone. Don't cry. I just want to make sure you know this before you get there. It's not the salt of the earth Brooklyn that you were hoping for, that you romanticized in your dreams. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be that. But if you're looking for a yoga studio, I'm pretty sure there's somebody there that can help you out.
Bomani.
Talking about the NBA draft, look, after you got out of that top three, I didn't see great players, right? I just didn't see guys that you absolutely had to have. I'm a little bit surprised that Knicks fans, rather than convincing themselves they just got super Dirk, they have just decided to be mad. And Melo was mad. And Melo's mad. I will never begrudge anybody for doing something for the money. I never will, right? Because that money is fleeting, especially when you're not going to be making that kind of money for the rest of your life. So Melo took the money that the Knicks gave him. And look, at every turn, Melo's made sure that he got the money. Melo set up that situation with the trade to New York from Denver to make sure that he got the money, at the expense of the roster that the Knicks were able to put together because they had to trade so much to get him, right? But he wanted to make sure he got his money. He signed in on this deal with the Knicks because he wanted to make sure that he got his money. They ain't give you that money for free. Part of why you're taking that money right now is that you're stuck playing with some losers. And, he's like, we got to get better right away. I totally get that. But y'all won 17 games last year. I understand why you're in a hurry. But this ain't going to happen fast, no matter what they do.
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. He covers the Cleveland Cavaliers for the Northeast Ohio Media Group. And if I'm not mistaken, he might officially be our most frequent guest thus far in the short history of the right time. His name is Chris Haynes. Chris, what's going on?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm the right guy for the right time, Bo. Thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, man, let me tell you, that also in another way is a way for us to say that you'll never be doing nothing on Friday night. And I appreciate that because I'm not doing anything on Friday night. I'm right here, too. But you had a report today that LeBron James is opting out of his contract and that he kind of wants to see what's going on with the Cavs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, I got word of that is going to be his tactic during free agency. He wants to make sure that he puts the organization, in a situation where they have to improve the roster. He wants to make sure guys are taken care of. And I was told he's going to wait until the very end, until he's the last domino to fall. He wants to make sure Kevin Love is back, Tristan, Iman Shumpert, and if they're not, he wants to make sure the organization is doing what they can to replace those guys. And because being that he has 3, maybe 4 prime years left, that was one of the conditions when he came to Cleveland, that no matter what team he went to, that team was going to pay the luxury tax. They weren't going to worry about that because he wants to make sure there's a team around him capable each and every season, capable of winning the championship. And so this is his way. It's a small leverage, but this is his way to instill that pressure and making sure the organization does right and keep the team competitive.
Well, why do you say it's small leverage?
Because, I really don't. It's me personally talking. I just think that, what's the chance of him leaving again? How could he take that PR hit again? He wrote the way he left, and then the essay and coming back. And I swear, Bo, it feels like I didn't see not one person throughout the year that still had any ill wills towards how he left. That's just how great he smoothed things over. And so I don't think anybody can see him taking off again. But at the same time, there's still that uneasy feeling that the organization will have with him basically being free when he opts out. He's a free agent. He's just hanging out there. He's just dangling out there, just waiting. So there is going to be that uneasiness, especially if certain things aren't fall into place. If Kevin Love takes off, if they can't work out a deal with Tristan Thompson, who shares the same agent, Rich Paul, as LeBron James. So that's why I say it's a little leverage, because I really don't think he can do it again for the second time.
All right, we're talking to Chris Haynes of the Northeast Ohio Media Group. Now, true or false, LeBron James is the man in charge of the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I would go. That's all I get is true or false?
You got some room to work with that. You got some things, true, qualified, or false.
Well, look, I would go true, just to stick to the parameters. I would go true. The guy has so much. He has so much clout within the organization. And one thing I will say this, though, another thing I wrote in that story is that, he's not going to use his clout, the clout that he does have at his disposal, because, he definitely has the power to make personnel changes with just opening up his voice. And David Blatt, the management ownership is saying he's returning. LeBron is not going to step into that mess. He's not going to meddle in with, personnel and the coaching staff. He wants the organization to do what's best, what they feel is best for the organization. And so he's not going to be the fall guy for anybody getting canned, even though he does have that power to do so. So, but yes, he's the man in charge, and, it's been like that all year.
All right, you mentioned Kevin Love earlier. Is there any chance that he does not return?
I think there's definitely a chance that he does not return. Man, he had a tumultuous year, man. And I've covered, before I was covering the Cavs, I was covering the Blazers, and, I was close to, Love and his family that, they're down in Lake Oswego nearby. I know the personality and traits of Kevin Love. And this is the thing. LeBron is a guy who likes the family-type environment around the team. And he feels like the better you guys get along off the court, it's going to translate on the court. Love is an introvert. He's a guy that sticks to himself. It's nothing personal, but that's just how he's glued. And I think that kind of rubbed LeBron the wrong way. And the other thing is this too. Even though it's trivial in my opinion, when Kevin Love went out there and said, "Hey, I would pick Westbrook as my MVP." Hey, look, I applaud Love for being open, candid, and honest, because we in the media, that's what we want. We're tired of the cliches and the same old talk, and he gave an honest opinion. But in a time like that, with that guy in the locker room, a couple of locker stalls down, anybody else in that locker room would have said LeBron James, because it's like you just can't go against the grain and do that. Even though Love wasn't thinking at the time, he wasn't thinking that was going to be a big problem or a big issue. But I think it's like little things like that throughout the season that Love realized if he comes back, there's just some things he has to change about himself and how he goes about his everyday life.
Well, there's another thing to consider, which is we talk about bringing Tristan Thompson back. We talk about bringing Kevin Love back. They picked up the option on Timofey Mozgov, but those guys can't all play at the same time. Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson coming back, how well would they fit? Do they fit together when they're on the court together? Because neither one of them can protect the rim.
Yeah, a lot of times, even though Timofey Mozgov was a star, he's a very valuable component to that team. They would finish the game sometimes with Tristan at the center and Love at the 4. And then a couple of times, it was at least 3 or 4 times where Love wouldn't even finish the game. Blatt, at certain points in the game, he felt like Love was a defensive liability. And Love has never set out closing minutes like that. He would not play at all in the fourth quarter. And so that's just the way the situation is when you have a talented guy like Tristan, who is a starting power forward in his own right. When you have that guy, you can switch and mix and match lineups like they can. So I think it'll just go Blatt. If he likes to play with feel and flow, so it depends on who's going at that time, and I think that would dictate who finishes out the game.
All right, talking to Chris Haynes of the Northeast Ohio Media Group. One question I had about the Cavs coming off of the playoffs, given all the injuries they had, were they able to really take an inventory of what needs to improve for next season?
Yeah, they definitely knew depth was going to be an issue going into the Warriors series. The Warriors, to start the series off, the Warriors, they would play 10, 11 deep, but as the finals went on, they kind of shortened that rotation to 6 or 7. But no, they knew even before Kyrie and Love was out that Dellavedova, as awesomely of the 2 games that he played in that finals, became a household name. He's, I'm gonna say he's not a backup point guard in this league. He's not. And they knew they were going to have some deficiencies and some inefficiencies. And they've always wanted to shore up the backup point guard position. And they thought coming in that Sean Marion would be that legitimate backup small forward. Those scenarios never played out. And so, they knew they had some weaknesses, but they also felt like, hey, with LeBron James, the best player on the planet, anything is possible. And so that's why LeBron James, let me tell you something about this too, Bo. Bo, I've never covered a guy who would dial up plays, call up plays, scratch plays. Like, he was all over the place this year as far as his roles and responsibilities. I know he does not want to do that again. It was too much on him. And even though, people give him praise for doing everything, and scratching the play to draw up the game-winning jumper he hit against Chicago, he doesn't want to go through all that, and he feels like he doesn't have to go through that. So, he wants improvement across the board, roster, wise, so they won't have to be in that type of position.
All right, Chris Haynes, Northeast Ohio Media Group. Check his work out there. My man, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Anytime, my guy. You got to take care.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Bomani.
There's this thing that social media has given us that we didn't really have before, which is not simply the instant reaction to things, right? Because, people have always had the ability to instantly react, and, the social media platforms allow us to get the instant reactions from fans everywhere, but it also allows us to get the instant reaction of people who are, integrally involved in these things. I think that was one of the initial draws to social media, was the fact that you could see, an athlete talking about how he was working out or where they were hanging out and things. It made the world a whole lot smaller, right? And as the draft was going on, after the Nuggets drafted Emmanuel Mudiay, who plays point guard, we got one of those instant reactions. And basically it was a live stream I don't even know it was live. I saw it when it was taped. But it was at Ty Lawson's house as he listened to the draft, or as he watched the draft. Now, keep in mind that Ty Lawson is a point guard and Emmanuel Mudiay is a point guard. Here we go. Yep, that was his reaction to hearing that the Nuggets had taken a point guard. Told you, I'm going to Sacramento. Now, Sacramento, of course, is where George Karl coaches. George Karl, who, like Ty Lawson, went to the University of North Carolina. George Karl wants to run an up-tempo offense. Ty Lawson is nothing if not up-tempo, even though I'm not exactly sure if Ty Lawson really likes George Karl that much. Anyway, he looked up and was like, yep, getting traded. I believe our Jeff Goodman then got on the television immediately after and said, yes, they are looking to trade Ty Lawson. Now, to me, the best part of that is the stuff that you couldn't see when we played that on the radio because, duh, it is a radio, right? So, Ty Lawson's house is basically exactly what you would expect Ty Lawson's house to be if you know anything about Ty Lawson. I remember when Ty Lawson was at Carolina, when I was living in North Carolina, and I'd cover a game here and there. And, Ty Lawson as a freshman is, walking around after games in SpongeBob pajamas. That's just the dude Ty Lawson is. Ty Lawson at the press conference where he and Wade Ellington said that they were declared for the draft, somebody asked those guys if they were going to come back and finish their degrees, right? So on one side, you got Wayne Ellington, and Wayne Ellington is wearing this three-piece suit, and he's doing his best to look like it's supposed to look at a moment like that, right? To his right is Ty Lawson, who is wearing a polo shirt and some jeans, and his parents are there, and clearly they have given up on, trying to get Ty Lawson to do grown-up things at this point in his life. So the question comes up for Lawson, and they ask if Lawson was going to was going to come back and finish his degree, and he laughed. He chuckled. He said, yeah, I'm going to come back and finish that degree. Dude, there's a better chance that I'm going to go back and finish his degree than there is of him going back and finishing that degree. It ain't happening. That's just the dude he is. So the clip of Ty Lawson in his living room is Ty Lawson and, three of his homeboys, and there's a hooker. Right. At his house, there is a hooker. But, inexplicably, there are no women there as they hit the hooker. And I got to tell you, in my experience in this world, not once have I ever seen anybody break out the hooker except if women were around. Right? Because otherwise, it's a little dainty. Anyway, there they are, right? Four dudes sitting around watching the draft. And it's basically just Ty Lawson and a bunch of dudes. One of the dudes is over there sitting on a couch with no shirt on, right? So light-skinned dude with no shirt, a bunch of tattoos, and a quasi-maintained afro of sorts. And it just basically looked like if the draft wasn't on, it'd be a four-man game of Call of Duty. That's what it would be. That's what they would be doing. They would just be sitting around playing video games all day long. So the pick comes, Lawson finds out what it is. He blows out a big old cloud of hookah smoke. And it's like, yep, told you, I'm going to Sacramento. I love the NBA so much because that's not happening anywhere else. There's nowhere else that a dude is sitting, no other sports league where the dude is going to live stream you with his partners in a very well decorated house, by the way. Something I'm sure that was paid for. Just sitting around, hitting the hookah, watching the draft. And by the way, he's probably going to Sacramento. Speaking of Sacramento, and the telephone number is 888-729-3776. It seems we're getting the word that Sacramento is thinking about firing George Karl. And they're thinking about firing George Karl. I don't care what they give you of their official explanation for being. They got to be thinking about firing George Karl for the reason they should be thinking about firing George Karl, which is you got you being insubordinate. I mean, what else do you call that? Hey, we told you we're keeping Boogie. Well, I'm going to try to run Boogie out. That's just being insubordinate. That's it. Right? So now they're thinking about moving him. Of course, they can't move him. Like we've talked about this here on the show before, but it bears repeating. Look, in the NBA, it is a players' league. Like I talked to my agent about this, and he always says that the NBA is a players' league, and that is not a good thing. That's the way he sees it. I see arguments, honestly, on both sides, but just the nature of the game. There's only 5 people on the floor. A very good basketball player has more impact than anybody else in American team sports. It's simple as that, right? But do you really want to turn it all over to Boogie? Like, I think Boogie gets a bad rap in a lot of ways, but I'm not trying to put him in charge. Like, when the word got out that the Lakers were thinking about trading him, I'm like, no, trading for him, rather. I'm like, no. If you're Sacramento, you have Boogie, and you build a plan around Boogie. But if you're the Lakers, and you don't have a plan, you don't get Boogie. It's simple as that. Like, you better have a really good plan. If I have to say that about you, I don't think I need to make you the guy in charge. And if you run George Karl out, you're basically saying that Boogie's in charge. I mean, there's no way around that. If George Karl were to get fired, look, they fired Paul Westphal because of that crazy stuff he did with Boogie. This would be the second coach that they would have had to fire because he treated DeMarcus Cousins the wrong way. Like, I don't think he's going to walk in there and start acting like the general manager because, quite honestly, I don't think he has any desire to do that. I think by all indications, DeMarcus Cousins wants to be a really good basketball player. And I think he wants to get more respect than he feels that he receives. Think about what happened with him on Team USA where he felt like those guys had just made up their minds about him and he wanted to go talk to him about why they had that impression of him. Like, I think he's done a lot. I don't know how capable he is at all times of doing the things necessary to change those impressions of him. But he wants to change the impressions that people have of him. So I don't think if George Karl got fired that suddenly he's going to walk around like he owns the joint. But it sure wouldn't look like he did. Like, if he thought he did own the joint, I would understand. So I think that George Karl thought he had created a situation where, look, he looked around. He saw the most powerful person in the room was Boogie Cousins, and he wanted to be the most powerful person. So you got to run off the person that's the most powerful. Like, I think that's effectively what he thought was going to happen. What he did, really, though, was make a situation where none of them can go. They can't trade Boogie because they're all in on Boogie, and they gave him that word. They can't fire George Karl because they fired so many coaches in the last 2 years. So now they're stuck with each other. Like, all George Karl did was make it awkward. That was it. All he did was make it awkward. And maybe they start winning some games right away and things get better. But I do think that both sides are going to up and realize that they're kind of stuck with each other. And it's going to be in the best interest of both just to go ahead and make this work. But George Karl, if they do start losing games, you're fired. I mean, that's it. If games get lost, you, my man, are donezo. And you should be donezo, because that's what you get for being insubordinate. And I understand all the arguments where you knew that this is what George Karl was going to do because George Karl always does these things in every place he goes to. That's fine. However, donezo. He would have to be donezo.
Bomani.
Sixers fans, do you feel like suckers yet? I think that's a fair question to ask. If you're a Sixers fan, at what point do you start to feel like a sucker? Because I feel as though Sam Hinkie has basically just told the world the check's in the mail. That's it. The check's in the mail. I'm just going to take the best player available every time, and it'll be an asset, and then I'll turn that asset into something. What are you going to turn that asset into? That's always the question. So basically what Sam Hinkie is doing is this, right? Sam Hinkie is getting into the lottery, right? And then what he's doing, once he gets into the lottery, is he's taking those lottery picks and then turning them into lottery tickets. Now, look, I understand every player, in effect, is a lottery ticket. But if the notion is that these guys are basically assets and you're betting on their valuation, not the function that they actually serve, but their valuation. Because when we start talking about players as assets in the context that the Sixers do, we really don't tend to talk about them as being assets for the Sixers. It's about what they could be turned into in another deal. You see what I'm saying? So basically what Hinkie is doing, it's like he's playing Scrabble, right? And he just keeps throwing his hand back, trying to get a 7-letter word with a Q and an X in it. At some point, man, you got to get some points. And that's not what he's doing. So, Hinkie, the game for them, and I understand this point, is that the game is you need to get a superstar, or the best way to build a winner is a superstar. Now, I would ask this question. Who on the Warriors fits that profile? Right? Who on the Warriors fits that profile? We can go through and look at the last few champions that we've had. I would argue that the Mavericks did not have a superstar. We don't think of Dirk Nowitzki as being a superstar player. He is a great player. He's an all-time great player, but I think you understand what I'm saying. We're not talking about him like Magic Johnson, LeBron James, Akeem Olajuwon type players, right? And I mentioned those three to kind of give you a range of who the superstars are, right? I don't think you would argue that that team had a superstar. I do not think that you would argue that the 2014 Spurs had a superstar. I mean, they had Tim Duncan, but this isn't 2005 Tim Duncan, right? I don't think that you would argue that this Warriors team truly had a superstar. Like, the Steph Curry story is great, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they had a superstar. I'm saying that to say that the get a superstar game is not the only way to win a championship, and getting a superstar is really hard and really rare. Really hard and really rare. Like, Hinkie needed to win a lottery in a year when Anthony Davis was there. That hasn't happened. Now, the closest thing to that was getting Joel Embiid. The thing was they got Joel Embiid, what, at number 3? Why could they get him at number 3? Because he's got problems with his wheels. No, that's right. He had the back problem before, and then we found out about the problem with the wheels. My fault. I got that mixed up. All right? So this year in the draft, the Sixers decided to take Jahlil Okafor. Now, I understand the argument that you can't pass up on Okafor. Now, I am worried about Okafor with the changing game just because a guy like him, you could put somebody out there that he's got a guard in the corner and you got a problem. There are also questions as to whether or not he's ever going to wind up being an effective rim protector. Now, who knows? Maybe he could turn into Roy Hibbert, but I remember Roy Hibbert being a much better defensive player in college than Okafor was, right? So maybe he turns into that guy, but I haven't seen it yet. And the fact that the Lakers would pass on him tells me something. Because we have history in the NBA that indicates that you don't pass up on that guy if he's there. And if you if you think that Okafor with his offensive game can be even a capable rim protector, he's the number 1 pick in the draft. Like, he's going to be so good on offense, right? But the Sixers have taken big men the last 3 years, and I don't think that you can pair either of them on the floor together on a championship contender. I don't. Noel's not going to give you perimeter offense. Embiid's not going to give you perimeter offense. Okafor's not going to give you perimeter offense. So what are you going to do with both of those guys? I mean, all 3 of those guys. Can any of them play together? Now, I've heard the argument that Noel is going to be a guy that plays on the perimeter and then comes in to crash the boards. Here's the thing, though. As good a defensive player as Noel is, shot blocker Noel is going to be, who's Okafor supposed to guard? That becomes the same question if you put him out there with Embiid. So now you're saying, okay, we've got assets. We'll just trade one of these guys. Are you trading Noel? Because I'm not sure how much I'm giving up for a guy that I don't think is ever going to be a good offensive player. Are you trading Embiid? There's only one way you wind up trading Embiid. You trade Embiid if he's got a bad wheel. Or do you wind up trading Okafor? Maybe that winds up happening. But how long will it be before Okafor can really fetch a haul? What, like 2 or 3 years? Okay, so what's the team going to be then? Now, maybe that dude Sarge comes over from overseas, right? Maybe he winds up being that guy. I don't know. All I know is the idea behind trust the process with the Sixers is really because you don't have a better option, right? You might as well trust the process because it makes you feel better to trust the process. I get that. But at some point, don't you have to feel like a sucker? Like, really. At some point, don't you have to realize that Sam Hinkie, I'm sorry, there's a big difference between the two. Sam Hinkie never has to be accountable for everything because all he has to say is part of the process. Now, people talk about Hinkie being a Daryl Morey disciple, right? That's where he comes from. He comes from the Daryl Morey school of things. I have been highly critical of Daryl Morey at lots of points, okay? Highly critical of Daryl Morey. One thing I do have to say about Daryl Morey, though, he's put out decent teams most of the time. Like, they haven't had the playoff success that I think merits the reputation that he has garnered in the league. I don't think that. I have questions about the team that he has compiled as it exists. However, Morey got that job for the 2007-2008 season. They've only had one season under 500, right? Now, granted, he took over a team that was a little better than the team that Hinkie got, but he also took over a team that was built around having Yao Ming, and Yao Ming had to retire. Hey, man, he has at least given us decent teams because you have to do that in Houston to keep anybody's interest. What's your man Hinkie doing? So how long do you trust the process? Like, how long does it have to be before this starts bearing some sort of fruit if you're a Sixers fan? I ask that as a serious question. Like I say, from here, it feels like you're getting played. It feels like the dude keeps telling you that the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail. I'm just telling you, I played enough Scrabble to know. You keep throwing your hand back in, throwing your hand back in, throwing your hand back in. At some point, you just wind up behind and you can't catch up.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
I had one Sixers fan who just got in my Twitter mentions and told me that listening to me was like going to the dentist, and then he told me about how Sam Hinkie apparently had a good press conference today, and he's trusting the process. And I think that he is a sucker. Hey, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I get it. I'm just saying, at some point, it's got to start bearing some fruit. Now, I also had some people hit me up. This happens every time I do this. I said that I don't think the Warriors have a superstar caliber of player. They don't have a superstar caliber of player. Now, of course, the immediate response is, well, what about Steph Curry? I'm not saying Steph Curry isn't really good. I'm not even saying that Steph Curry shouldn't have won the MVP. I am saying this, though. I think that there is an entire tier of player above Steph Curry. Like, LeBron James is in a different class than Steph Curry. A different class. Kevin Durant is in a different class than Steph Curry. You can't be a superstar if I can name people who are simply in a different class than you are, right? And I think that we would all agree that those are guys that are just in a different class than Steph Curry is, right? So, I mean, he's really, really, really good. Like, don't get me wrong. But when the Warriors put that team together, it wasn't like, you know what? We're going to build this thing around Steph Curry. That wasn't what it was. It was like, we got Steph Curry. Now what do we do? Those are two different things. So that's not an insult to Steph Curry. I just don't throw superstar around willy-nilly. I just don't. In this league, I'd say there are three superstars right now. LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis. Those are the three guys that I think are on a tier simply above the rest of the league. If this had been like 2010, I'd have given you, say, Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard was a superstar caliber player. Personnel moves in the East were being dictated by the fact that to get out of the East, you need to have somebody that could guard Dwight Howard one-on-one, on top of the fact he was the best defensive player in the world at that point, right? Like, he was a superstar player then. Chris Paul is, like, not so far away from it, except for that, you know, keeps getting stopped in the second round thing, right? I mean, you can make the argument where Anthony Davis has never been past the second round. Yeah, that's fine. I haven't seen this keep happening to him now for like 8 years. But anyway, it's not a knock on Stephen Curry to say that I don't think that he is a superstar caliber player. I just need you to tell me, if he's a superstar, how can there be a tier of player above him? And I don't really have an answer for that. Do you? 888-729-3776. Let's talk to James in Alabama. James, thanks for calling the right time.
My man, Bomani, what's happening, man? Love the show. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, man, I just got to go back to the Jahlil Okafor pick. Man, that whole situation in Philly is all messed up with all those bigs, and I think he knew it, because if you look, when he got picked, they panned over to his face, and let me tell you, he looked like a kid that was waiting for the ice cream truck, and it turned down the street before it got to him. He was upset, and you can tell it, and I'm just wondering how long before he just gives up, because it's almost like a no-win situation with all those guys up there, and he's going there to be another big, and there's really no spot for him. What are they going to do with him? It's crazy.
Well, I will say this, man. I appreciate the call. There's a spot for him because Embiid, who knows when he's going to play, right? Now, you mentioned something that I always find to be interesting that doesn't come up that much, which is for a lot of these dudes, they're going to lose more basketball games as rookies in the NBA than they have lost in their entire lives. Like pickup, college, AAU, put it all together. They're going to lose more than they've ever lost, right? So Okafor, man, he's coming off that national championship. His daddy in the crowd, getting his groove on, wearing the shirts with John's face on it and everything else. His daddy was just a picture of happiness, right? Like, for the first time ever, the Duke family section made the rest of America happy, right? And it was largely because of Okafor's daddy. He was just having a great time. Man, what's that man gonna look like when they out there losing 65 games next year? That's what I want to know. What's it going to look like when they getting smacked game after game after game after game after game? I'll never forget this as long as I live. I don't know. Some of you guys remember this. Some of you may be too young to remember it. Some of you just weren't watching TV that night. But Jerry Stackhouse's rookie year was one of those rookie years where a guy clearly was losing more games than he had ever lost in his life, right? More games than he'd ever lost in his life. And it wasn't just anybody who was losing more games than he'd ever lost in his life. It was Jerry Stackhouse losing more games than he'd ever lost in his life. And Jerry Stackhouse played a game against the Utah Jazz, right? Look here. Jerry Stackhouse fouled Jeff Hornacek hard. Jeff Hornacek, currently the coach of the Phoenix Suns, he fouled him hard. Jeff Hornacek popped up, wanted to show Jerry Stackhouse that he meant business, and he got right in Jerry Stackhouse's face. Man, Jerry Stackhouse put those hands on him. Like, that was the day that we realized what Jerry Stackhouse was about. That was the day that we realized it, right? They asked Jerry Stackhouse about that the next day. Jerry Stackhouse was like, look, man, I just snapped. I just snapped. And that's what it was. He just snapped. He never lost that many games in his life. I feel bad for those cats, man, because the problem is this. There's not but so many people around you who can cheer you up because you just moved to Philadelphia, right? Only people you know are on the team. Only reason people know you on the team is because you're on the team, right? So you're just surrounded by losing and losers. That's it. That's what you're surrounded by. Like every day you go to work, you're going to work with a bunch of losers, right? Nobody just has one individual bad day at work when you're playing for a team full of losers. We all losing. And then they're switching these dudes in and out, like all these D-League caliber cats on these contracts where they get the year guarantee that they're playing in the next or team options. All these dudes that, like, honestly, they will be telling people for the rest of their lives that they played in the NBA. But they're not NBA players. You know, they'll have a basketball card. They'll be able to pull up the page on Basketball Reference to show girls at the club to verify that they in the NBA. But they're not NBA players. And that's what you're going to be around, right? We had Jahlil Okafor as like the future of the NBA. Presumptive number one pick the entire way, man. And next year, he just going to be one of those losers, man. That's just what it's going to be. That doesn't sound like fun. It just doesn't.
Bomani.
Draft was last night, and I don't know why we're pretending as though we watched the draft for the picks. Like, you don't have to watch on television to get the picks. You have to watch on television to see the suits. That's why I watched the draft. Now, look, the suits are not as good as they used to be. The worst thing to ever happen to the draft was stylists, right? Because I always felt like with the draft and with the suits, you could really get an indication of where people were coming from and kind of sort of where they were going, right? Because suits are a class thing, right? And I think that there are a lot of people out there who don't understand how many people like never owned a suit until they became adults, or like didn't even have one in college for any sort of reason, like got through and figured out how to do it, whatever. But there are a lot of people who never owned any suit whatsoever. And I honestly do believe that there are a lot of people, based on the lives that they live, are just not around folks who live that kind of life. There's just a lot of people who never had a suit, or if they got a suit, it doesn't fit because it's somebody else's suit and they had to get it. You know, it's levels. It's all kinds of stuff with that. So the draft would always be interesting because cats were A, showing out, but B, they were showing out without having any idea what they were doing, right? So we had that whole era of like the 8-button suits, you know, the masterpiece suits. It was a wonder them cats wasn't showing up with the tag still on the suits, right? And they look, this was their night, and they would go wear that suit, and they all look back on it like, man, what the hell was I thinking? Like, you remember Karl Malone was in that suit with the skinny tie. Charles Barkley looked like he was going to park somebody's car. Chuck Person is quite possibly the most underrated contender in the all-time great, and by great, I mean great and terrible argument for the worst suit ever. I mean, Chuck Person had on a white tuxedo, and I think it was a purple cummerbund. That's right. There was a cummerbund. And by the way, when you put in Chuck, it was pink. When you put in Chuck Person into Google, draft suit comes up immediately. And so it's Chuck Person in a white tuxedo with a pink bow tie and a pink cummerbund. Man, it's been some awful draft suits, right? Like Samaki Walker. I feel like Samaki Walker got drafted in what, like 1995? He was on that 96. All right. He was on that no-limit kick before the rest of America. He had on a derby and this cream-colored suit. You know, hey, man, we don't get those anymore so much because now the cats got stylists. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't still wear, like, ridiculous things. I mean, they try their best, but we got a lot more people there with governors who are able to kind of rein them in. Oh, my God, I'm looking at this picture of Tim Thomas in his suit, and I feel so bad for Tim Thomas in this, right? Because here's what happened to Tim Thomas with this suit. All Tim Thomas knew was that he needed to go buy a suit. Nobody told Tim Thomas anything about alterations. Like, as far as Tim Thomas knew, you got a suit and you just had to fit it. No different than a T-shirt, right? That's it. This poor dude is in this suit. Oh, my God. It's so like David Stern. You know, they tailoring up David Stern every other week to make sure his suits are always pristine. Tim Thomas is in a 3-button, double-breasted, white pinstripe suit with a black shirt and high waters. High waters. Did they even take him to the big and tall? Like, did they even tell him that they have pants that are uncuffed and they can cuff them after they put them on you? Couple cats came down with it, though. Devin Booker had that fresh blue. D'Angelo Russell, I keep telling y'all, man, D'Angelo Russell going to be a star. He had the suit game ready like he's going to be a star. Your man Karl Anthony Towns looked like he got run over, though. Like, that's what it looked like. It looked like he got run over. There were these, you know, these lines going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, you know, I thought he got run over. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. When Drew Gooden came to the draft looking like Raiden, you remember that? It looked like his suit had a zipper because it didn't have any buttons or, like, any evidence of anything else and went all the way up to the top. He looked like Dick Tracy. But that was his suit. Our man Jalen Rose, of course, in the legendary red pinstripe. Your friendly reminder that Jalen Rose is, in fact, from Detroit. Like, here's how much we got on draft fashion over the years. Staj, pull up that picture right there of Akeem Olajuwon with David Stern. Akeem Olajuwon showed up in a tuxedo. Akeem Olajuwon also appears to have some variety of a process. Like, it's not quite a Jerry curl, but I assure you that when Akeem got to Houston from Nigeria, his hair was not of that texture. I promise you that. But he got his tux right. Like, a tux was going a little bit too far, but he got his tux right. Dream was not about to be out here looking bad. That was never what it was going to be. It was never going to be that. Some of these boys, though, good gracious. Now, everybody's got a handler. Everybody's got somebody. Let these boys show their style a little bit more, right? Why? Let them have a little bit more input on what they want to do. Don't tell them anything. Like, let's just make it a contest. Let's just see who can figure out on his own how a suit is supposed to fit. And yes, I am suggesting that these gentlemen look ridiculous on television for my own entertainment. Here's Joakim Noah. That suit was fresh. He had on that cream joint with the brown accents on it, and he went with the ridiculous bow tie. Like, the suit itself was kind of fly. He went the full Joakim Noah. Here he is taking a picture with David Stern where I cannot see Joakim Noah's eyes because the bill of his cap is pulled down low. Yeah, there we go. Your man Willie Cauley-Stein came out there with a chain with a peace sign on it over his suit, which, I mean, if that's what you want to do, I didn't know that was back in style. I was watching something. I'm trying to remember what it was. It might have been the draft. I can't remember. But they showed somebody, and he was sitting there, and he had a button-up shirt, and the shirt was buttoned all the way up to the top, and he had a chain going under the collar and across it. And I was like, what kind of P.O. box chic are you going for? I didn't know that anybody outside of the country wore a chain underneath there. Now, there's your man Frank Kaminsky. Frank Kaminsky decided that he was going to be outfitted by J.C. Penney, but he went so far as to have tanks sewn on the inside of his jacket because he's Frank the Tank. And I personally am just a little bit confused as to why it is that you would go so far as to personalize the inside of your jacket, but you would be so lame as to go to J.C. Penney. Like, Frank, this isn't cute now that you have money. There's some things that we'll find to be adorable. Like, if you're an NBA star and you drive a mid-level car, we will find that to be endearing. We will consider you to be a man of the people. if you're in the NBA and you wear cheap suits, we just going to talk about you. Oh, look, Peja Stojakovic in a no-limit suit. Anyway, yeah, we just going to talk about you. That's it. Like, if you have bread, there is no excuse for you to be wearing a whack suit. You know why? Because it's just as easy to get a nice suit as it is to get a whack one. So why are you going to get your clothes from JCPenney? Here's what I want to know, Frank. I want to know what kind of car Frank going to be driving. And that's right. Because I bet you Frank ain't going to be coming out the parking lot in a Malibu. Nah. Ain't nothing cool about that. Oh, as I'm talking, they pulled up that picture of Carmelo. Carmelo also had a Dick Tracy suit. I don't know how many buttons this suit's got, but them buttons go all the way to the top. Like, all the way. LeBron wore a white tux. It was by far the cleanest dude at that draft. In a white tux. Yeah, look at that hairline, too. Looking like a young man.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.